Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss the widening split in the Conservative Parliamentary Party between Johnson's supporters and now a group of Red Wall MPs who are seeing the Prime Minister as a massive electoral liability. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So it's all kicked off this week. Dominic Cummings says he would swear on oath that Boris Johnson was told the May 20th party of 2020 was against the rules and he just didn't care. And then after news that a group of MPs from the new intake of 2019 were meeting yesterday to discuss their confidence in Boris Johnson, which by the way is very low, a cabinet minister reportedly raged about them, saying that they were mostly nobodies. This follows on from last week when Jacob Rees-Mogg called the leader of the Scottish Conservatives a political lightweight, resulting in the inevitable reaction that many Scottish Conservatives had to denounce Rees-Mogg for his stupidity. So now Johnson and his posse have attacked the Scottish wing of their own party and now the North of England wing as well. When you're under pressure and in desperate need of allies, I'm not entirely convinced that calling the people whose support you need lightweights and nobodies is really going to help. And I wonder who the cabinet minister was that called these MPs nobodies. It may be that it was revealed. Part of me wonders if it was Rees-Mogg, not having learned his lesson yet. Could have been Nadine Dorries. She's both a bit dim and very aggressive. The problem with political storms when they happen on a Tuesday is that I'm away from the internet and I miss them all as they happen. So I can sometimes miss out on some of the details. But it hardly matters who it was. The point is that such an outburst can only actually have the effect of turning more MPs against Johnson. After all, by calling the 2019 intake mostly nobodies, the few remaining that will publicly back Johnson at this point are basically people who have no self-respect. You know, they're supporting someone who not has directly called them a nobody, but has allowed them to be called a nobody. Because this cabinet minister wasn't just singling out the ones who met yesterday lunchtime to discuss ousting Johnson, but the whole lot of them. Some who were prepared to sit tight might take umbrage at casting their vote, for Johnson if a confidence motion were to come before them, for the fact that he's not backing them. Because loyalty works both ways. The minister in question was trying to make the point that these new MPs owe their position to Boris Johnson. And sure enough, it was Johnson's campaigning ability, undemocratic nature and election lies that meant that these new MPs have their jobs as MPs. Some of the new MPs inherited safe seats from the roughly 20 Conservative MPs who had the whip withdrawn for refusing to go along with Johnson's hard Brexit. Many of them won their seats in areas where the Conservatives would not ordinarily expect to win because of the way he gaslighted poorer communities in the Midlands and the north of England over Brexit. And here's the thing. Johnson has received his reward from them. They voted him powers that have not been enjoyed by a head of government since we had an absolute monarchy. They gave him powers that no legislative body should ever surrender to the executive. He was given free rein to handle Brexit, to handle COVID, to handle the general government of the country with almost no parliamentary scrutiny. They have voted through legislation designed to take away our rights and freedoms. They are paving his road to a fascist dictatorship. They have done everything he demanded of them. Everything. And he'd already chipped away at their loyalty by insisting that they back very unpopular moves that had no benefit to the government, like charging NHS workers extra taxes or starving hungry kids, only to announce a U-turn on those policies after he'd made those MPs publicly back them, which means that those MPs who did publicly defend those policies then looked like right tits. And what has Johnson done to reward this blind loyalty on their part? Has he ensured that they will keep their seat on the gravy train for the long term? Well, for a while they thought he had. That's why they didn't kick up a fuss. They would chunter every time he U-turned and made them look stupid. But they thought they were still going to win their seats next time. Their popularity was maintained. even when it became clear that he wasn't delivering on his levelling up promises, which when they thought about it, they realised nobody actually knew what that meant anyway. But the constituencies where many of these new MPs won their seats, they're not really Conservative areas. They voted Tory in the massively mistaken belief that Boris Johnson was going to deliver a programme of wealth redistribution. I mean, in a way he is. But whereas they thought he was going to flatten the wealth distribution curve and drag it away from the top end, Boris Johnson has actually squashed it more into that top end. It makes me despair when I see people in Vox Pots, or, when people go out and do little interviews of people on the street in these areas, and you get someone who'll say that they voted for Boris Johnson because he wasn't one of those Etonian toffs like Cameron. You what, mate? There they both are at the same time. There's both Cameron and Johnson. They're cut from the same cloth. In fact, Johnson is worse. What was it someone said to me this week? Someone said, when you consider the damage and embarrassment that the last decade of Tory rule have caused this country, and the most embarrassing Tory Prime Minister of the lot isn't the one who shagged a dead pig. That's how bad Johnson is. But the point is that in politics, you don't get rewarded for what you've done. You get rewarded for what you're going to do. Those new MPs have their job now. Johnson can't do anything about that. He won them those seats and they have rewarded him. He took the whip away from one of them last week for voting to make it easier for her voters to pay the bills. But she's still an MP. He can't take that away from her. And she will remain an MP until at least the next election. There's nothing he can do about that. But will he help them win their seats in that next election? They have come to the conclusion that the answer is no. The polls are in tatters. Even with the voter suppression measures that they voted through for him this week, they're still onto a loser right now. Johnson isn't delivering anything that these Midlands and Northern MPs can give as a reward to the votes that were lent to them in 2019. He's also personally toxic. If there had been by-elections in some of these Red Wall seats last year and they'd gone back to Labour, you could have dismissed that. They could have said, well, we overreached a little bit with Brexit in 2019 and now that that's done, and some were always going to go back to Labour. But they lost 2 safe Tory seats. Even traditional Conservative voters have had it with Johnson. And the thing is, there was always going to be a battle with these Red Wall MPs at some point, regardless of what Johnson did. I said as far back as late 2019, when they'd won that majority, that the party had straddled 2 ideologically opposed groups in forming the coalition that resulted in that majority. You have the Conservatives, mostly in the south of England. See, they like the current distribution of wealth and power model because they hold it. Boris Johnson promised to send more of it up north. You what? No. That's what Labour keep doing. We don't want that. But that's why the popular South keeps voting Conservative, because they think they're conserving their privileges. Even when they're not entirely happy with what the Tories are doing, they vote for them because any blue is better than red. Those Red Wall voters, however, despite general polling, would not have blindly voted for the chimp in the blue rosette next time if they didn't see some work going on to justify their switch in 2019. They haven't been brought up just to vote Conservative. They haven't had that mindset all their lives. But to now be faced with the Prime Minister they voted for behaving as if the harsh rules he imposed on others were not for him, that's hugely off-putting. More than that, in trying to defend his rules breaking, Johnson has, rather than just apologise, if from the start he'd apologised, it would be ridiculous that he could just apologise and get away with it, but he would have done. If he'd have just apologised, come clean, he would actually have gotten away with it. But instead of that, he tried to suggest that the general public were a bit thick in following the rules quite so well themselves. Well, you should have just called your garden parties a work event and it would have been fine. Of course it wouldn't, because ordinary people were charged and fined a lot of money for doing less than the Prime Minister and his staff. But that was his point. And then consider this final thing. There are Conservative voters in the South who would still probably vote Conservative with Boris Johnson in charge, as someone being better than a Labour-led government, because that's how they think. Like I said, any blue is better than red. If the Tories stuck with Johnson, they would hold their nose and vote for him to remain even a clearly unsuitable Prime Minister. But this will not happen in the Red Wall seats. The voters who changed their habits in 2019 are not philosophically opposed to Labour. They do not think, well, any Tory government's better than Labour. Quite the reverse in many cases. They used to vote for Labour regularly as any Labour better than the Conservatives. They've got no beef with Labour. They've got no beef with Starmer. They will switch back to voting red if blue aren't coughing up the goods. That is why raging and disparaging remarks about the Red Wall Tories is not going to help Johnson and his minions. If they wanted their support, they should have understood their needs. Johnson didn't care. And that's what the takeaway from all this is. Boris Johnson doesn't care about even his own. You know, he's allowed one of his stooges to dismiss the entire Scottish Conservative movement last week. He didn't come out to defend them after Rees-Mogg's outburst. He didn't come out to say, no, I don't actually believe that. He's now allowed another, or maybe the same one, I don't know, to attack the Red Wall MPs. Again, no show of support for them from himself. He doesn't care about even those who can bring him down. Those he needs. He doesn't care about them. Just think how little he cares about the little people. And it is this disdain that is going to rightfully be his downfall. Like, there are some people who'll say, well, isn't it odd that he's not going to be brought down by Brexit or economic mismanagement or COVID mismanagement, humiliating us on the world stage, taking away our rights or rampant corruption. What's going to bring him down is that he couldn't even show a modicum of solidarity with a suffering public and lay off the parties while the rest of us did. He has been brought down because of his utter disdain for others. And I think that's fitting. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.